Let's quickly recognize elected officials and candidates. I see you, Mike. Logan County Commissioner Mike Pearson is over there. Wave at everybody, Mike. He wants to be recognized. Let's see, I also saw J.P. Jordan come in. He's right here, House District 43. Randy Draw from Edmond, standing up right here. Of course, our Speaker, Jon Echols from House District 90. Every year on the Conservative Index, he scores a 90. It's because he's from House District 90. He doesn't know any other number to hit. Are there any other candidates or elected officials I overlooked?
Ben Carson's in the back.
Ben Carson's in the back. And then, of course, the most important elected official in the room is our President Emeritus, Charlie Meadows, in his overalls over there. Now, I want to say something about Charlie before we really kick this meeting into high gear. This is one of the awards that we give out year in and year out to recognize conservative leadership in the House. Now, the name of this award is, let me read it off here. This is the name of the award, okay? Now, as a lawmaker, if you ever receive this award, you need to be able to say that I received the Maintaining a Lifetime Conservative Index Score of 90 or Above award. That's the name of the award. We're renaming the award to something simpler, okay? From now on, this is called the Charlie's Overall Conservative Award. You all can remember that, right? Charlie's Overall Conservative. Henceforth and forevermore, for those lawmakers who scored 90 or above lifetime average, like Jon Echols will always do, scoring a 90, they're going to receive the Charlie's Overall Conservative Award. And that recognizes and honors our founder, who always wears overalls and works really hard to be conservative, supporting his family and the state. Think about this for a minute. What do you tell your children when you say, okay, make your bed, clean your room, take out the trash, and they go, why? What do parents say? Because I said so. Right. Who's the creator? Who's the created? Who's the boss? Who's got the authority? The children don't exist until mom and dad get together and create them. Likewise, our union, Washington, D.C., does not exist if sovereign states don't get together and create it. And we told them to take out the trash and make the bed. Translation, defend the borders and deliver the mail. That's it. Okay? So what do they do when they go rob our neighbors and they rob our piggy bank and they get involved in doing all kinds of other stuff around the neighborhood? We say, stop. Why? Because I said so. It's in the dadgum Constitution. We don't fix the problem by parents getting together and saying, well, little Johnny's not obeying, so let's rewrite the rules. That's what an Article 5 convention does. We don't need to write the rules. They already don't obey the rules. We say, little Johnny, shut the heck up, give the money back, stop causing trouble, and do what I said because I said so. I'm the parent. The states are the parents. We have a capital, we have a governor, we have our own legislature. We have everything we need. The Declaration says we are sovereign states. States like the state of Great Britain, the state of Spain, the state of France. The states in this union were on equal footing until we forgot about it. It's time we remember that's going to allow us to fix everything. And that's kind of the heart of what we're going to talk about today, is how our legislature can stand up and start acting like a sovereign parent again. All right, so I've ranted and I've raved. Now, Mr. Jon Echols, please step right up here, sir. You're going to be our speaker today, representing House District 90. I have a couple of awards here. We had one of the finest banquets that we have had as an organization this last year. We had over 18 lawmakers with their families there to receive awards. We had a great speaker. We had several hundred people in attendance. And Kristen Echols was sick that evening. They couldn't make it. So we'd like to present the awards that you were not able to receive. First of all, here is your Freshman of the Year runner-up from last year. And now this one right here is the for maintaining a lifetime conservative index score of 90 or above, 2-year average of 90 from Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee, etc., etc. This is the Charlie's Overall Conservative Award, year in and year out. Thank you very much. so comfortable.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Speaking of the annual awards banquet, we're going to have the biggest and best one we have ever had coming up this year. Go ahead and mark your calendars for February the 5th, 2016. That's a Friday night. That's the first week after the legislature gets back in session. And we're going to have Matt Trujella here to talk about the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, talk about states' rights, and things of that nature. We're going to have a sit-down dinner. It's going to be a good time. Plan to bring your whole family. We'll get details out on that as they become available. And so now, John, I'm not going to tell you what to talk about. Just come talk, and I'm going to shut you up at about 1/4 or 10 till, and then we'll have a free-for-all.
I like it.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you guys. Well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I was really disappointed to miss. I sent you a text, Charlie, during the awards banquet. It was at my old high school, Christian Heritage, and not just my old high school, my wife's old high school, where when we graduated, coached cheerleading for years. I married my high school sweetheart, but as I tell people all the time, I do not have a 12-year term limit with my wife. So when she needs me, ladies and gentlemen, she comes first. Before the state, before my other jobs, that's just is what it is. But it's an honor to be here with you today. If I talk for 30 minutes without taking questions earlier, I will be shocked. Questions are a lot funner than listening to me go on and on. But there are a couple issues I want to bring to your attention. I'm going to take 3 issues in a row. I'm going to talk about the Blaine Amendment and the most recent Ten Commandments decision that came out. I'm going to talk about what we're doing out at the legislature. I'm going to talk. Oh, thank you. Oh, wow. Okay, and I'm going to talk about what we're doing in the legislature on the chairman's call for a special session on abortion and what the plans are for that. And I'm going to talk about the gay marriage decision and what we're doing at the legislature, what a group of conservatives are here wanting to talk about. I joke, I'll tell my joke later when Randy Graw comes back to the room, because it's poking fun at him and JP, because I know they'll get me later. So here's what I want to start with. Are many of you aware about the Supreme Court's most recent decision striking down the Ten Commandments monument at the Capitol?
Yes. Is there anyone in here that isn't aware of it?
I hope so. Yeah. Well, let me give you very briefly, I'm going to dispel some myths. And forgive me, a lot of the people in this room already know about these myths. But I'm going to dispel them quickly for those that don't. So let's talk about what the Blaine Amendment is, Article 2, Section 5, and let's talk about what it isn't. We have in the Oklahoma Constitution, just like 38 other states have, and I don't care what the Supreme Court says, I'm going to show you why, evidence-based, it is a Blaine Amendment. It is an amendment. The Blaine Amendment was originally started in the early 1800s when a Republican, Senator Blaine, wanted to run for the presidency, and he decided that was his best way to get there. So they passed an amendment that said, they passed an amendment out of the U.S. House, then it failed in the Senate, out of the House, that said you could not provide public funding to sectarian schools. And by sectarian, read Catholic. That's what they meant, that's what they said on the floor, that's why they did it. It is uncontroverted, that was the purpose. The Senate got a hold of that, and essentially, after a great debate, said this is a terrible idea, we're not going to pass this amendment, and we're not going to send it to a vote of the people. Well, like any good politician with a bad idea, I should say bad politician with a bad idea, he didn't take no lying down. So he got 38 different states to pass a series of Blaine amendments that you shall not spend public money in sectarian either schools or purposes. Now, let's differentiate that real quick from the Establishment Clause. We have the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which I know everyone here supports, that says the Congress shall create no law establishing a state religion. That is very different from the Blaine Amendment, which is what we have in the Oklahoma Constitution. Now, when it was created, though, the intent of the Blaine Amendment was not to stop, for example, all religions from public places. Does anyone know what the preamble of the Oklahoma Constitution starts with? Even before that. Before we the people.
All upon Almighty God. Did you read the newsletter this week?
Invoking the providence of Almighty God. That is how it began. That is the Oklahoma Constitution, invoking the providence of Almighty God. Every day of the Oklahoma Constitutional Convention started with a Judeo-Christian prayer. Every day of it. This was not a nebulous reference to a creator. This was not a nebulous reference to some type of deism. This was invoking the providence of Almighty God. The Constitution of the state of Oklahoma, the first line says, absent the providence of Almighty God, we can't create this state. That was the first line of the Constitution. So you can't tell me intellectually that the Blaine Amendment saying public money will not be spent on sectarian purposes means that we have to wash all religion from all vestiges of government. It can't mean that. If that's the case, the Oklahoma Constitution violates the Oklahoma Constitution. And a document can't violate it itself. This is just Logic 101. So what that meant was, in its intention in the Oklahoma version, absolutely it was anti-Catholic sentiment. But even more so, what it meant at the time was what we shouldn't do as a legislator, and I stand firm on this. I'm a deacon in a Southern Baptist church, and I should not appropriate dollars to my church. I give to your charity. I should not appropriate state dollars to your charity. It's not right. We shouldn't allow those things to happen. That's what the monument stood for. That's what the Blaine Amendment in the Oklahoma Constitution stood for. It never stood for the proposition that we have to wash all religion from all vestiges of government. But we have a decision right now that is exactly what it says. We actually have a decision that says the Fourth Amendment of the Fourth Commandment is repugnant. That's in the most recent decision that came out. Now, what happened is nobody wants to be in this day and age identified as a bigot. Nobody wants it. So we got a Supreme Court opinion that tried to ignore the fact that this is a Blaine Amendment, that this was an anti-Catholic sentiment. That's why we have it. It has a strained reading that says we must get rid of the Ten Commandments because the Ten Commandments are religious. I agree. Ten Commandments are religious. I agree with that. And we have to get rid of it. Did you know there's a cross in the rotunda of the Capitol?
Get a jackhammer.
Are we tear down? How many of you went to a home church? I did when I was younger, living on 16th and Rockwell. We went to a home church that met at a public school when it first started. I don't know if any of you ever did that. Yeah. According to this opinion, you can't do that anymore. How about the fact that Mercy has prayer every day at 5 o'clock, Mercy Hospital? Every day. Mercy's a religious organization. And I send Medicaid dollars to Mercy Hospital if you're on Medicaid and you go to Mercy. Those are state dollars. If I have no entanglement of religion with any state dollars, we can't do that. How about your local churches that have various daycare centers? Thank you. That have various daycare centers. Under this decision, we can't do that. Now, here's the bottom line. The decision was made because they wanted to get rid of the Ten Commandments monument. But it is creating chaos. Well, I was at a meeting I've been in numerous meetings with Chairman Graw, numerous meetings with Representative Jordan. We were at one just today with Jason Nelson, talking about what are we going to do? I mean, if this were to stand, if this is the new law, for one, it's a wrong interpretation. Well, what do we do? Well, here was the idea that on this issue, that working with Representative Jordan, Chairman Graw, and Chairman Newell, at the end of the day, I think the Supreme Court got it wrong, and there's a series of things to do. But here's the easiest and the quickest. I want to repeal that amendment. And I want to replace it with the language of the First Amendment, which says the legislature shall pass no law establishing religion. And that's what we want to put to a vote. Because at the end of the day, it's no more my Constitution than it is your Constitution. There's nothing special in that building or any other elected official. The people need to be the last word as to whether or not they want this. And I don't think they do. I don't think Oklahomans, and I've taken this on the road, I don't think Oklahomans, number one, believe that to be a Christian, you have to check your religious beliefs at the door before you walk into government. I find it offensive, I find it wrong, and I find that the direction we're going. That's where we're going. Right now, we start the legislative day with prayer. We can't do that under the Supreme Court decision. Right now on Thursday, members are allowed to bring their local pastors, and they give a message to the legislature. Listen, I wish we did that every day. We could use a lot more. We could use a lot more messages from pastors and a lot less bills. But that's what we need to be doing, and that's the direction we need to be going. Now let's talk about some lies. And you know, Charlie, you and I have talked for a long time. That's a big deal. You know, that's a big deal for me to use that word. I am about as down the middle as they come when I'm trying not to be too offensive. I want to speak the truth, but I want to speak it in love. Well, you're going to see me pretty harsh on some what I call lies. Not half-truths, not misunderstanding, lies. Have you heard the scare tactic now that if we keep up the 10 Commandments, we're going to have a Satanist monument? Come on. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's insane and it's a lie. And by the way, you shouldn't trust me any more than you should trust anybody else, so anybody can read it if they want. The United States Supreme Court decision in 2008, it was really close. It was unanimous. Every judge signed off on it. Let me tell you what happened in that decision. Pleasant Grove. There was a 10 Commandment monument put up in a city park in Utah. A sect, sound familiar? 10 Commandment monument, public property? A small sect of a religious group came and sued the city and said, you took a 10 Commandment monument that was donated by private funds. We want you to put up our 7 Commandment monument. And we're going to sue you. And we're going to say you're discriminating against us because you won't put it up. What a unanimous Supreme Court said is that the government is entitled to free speech too. And they even used an example that because the United States accepted the Statute of Liberty doesn't mean we had to accept another gift from Germany. You see that over and over and over again. The Vietnam War Memorial was with private funds. Does that mean that the government has to accept an anti-war memorial? Of course not. That's insane. And that's what the Supreme Court said. That's the law, guys. This is cut and dry. So if you have a lawyer, especially a trained lawyer, that is telling you there is any chance of a satanic monument unless it is voted on by the legislature and signed by the governor, it's just a lie. I mean, it's just that simple, and you can read the decision for yourself. It's a scare tactic, and it's never going to happen. There's never an occasion. Here's some other, just untruths. Right now, we want to rewrite history and actually go after, and you see it in the opinions. The opinions actually go after Dr. Ritz, Representative Ritz, who's a good member of the House, that there was something wrong with him donating, and this is just insane, that there's something wrong with him donating the monument. I don't think he gets enough credit for it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, that monument was paid for and donated by Dr. Ritz. Not once, but twice. It's not kind of biblical about being bought with a price, but I mean, not once, but 2 times. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And directed.
And
He
directed.
paid for the erection about $15,000.
At the expense. Because you're a legislature, you don't lose your rights to free speech.
No.
You don't give that away, and by golly, you don't want anybody that gives it away willingly.
That's right.
It's another lie that they keep telling you. They keep telling you that there are many of you probably know, the United States Supreme Court in the Van Orden case upheld an identical 10 Commandments monument at the Texas State Capitol. And we hear all the time that, that's in a monument park, and this one's different. Well, number one, the ACLU agreed there are 51 monuments on Capitol grounds. One of them is called the Jesus Thorn Tree. It was dedicated after the death of President Woodrow Wilson. Do I need to convince you that the Jesus Thorn Tree has some religious purposes? I mean, this is not hard, guys. I mean, this is 101. There's roughly in the teens in Texas. We Oklahomans love monuments. We build them to everything. That's what we do, and I like that. We like our history. There's nothing special. They'll tell you that this was put in a place of particular importance. The dissenting judge, Justice Combs, in his opinion said, it is hard to imagine a less inconspicuous place to have placed the monument. And do you know why it was placed there? Because that was the next spot to place the next monument. There was nothing special about its placement. We have a capital plan. That's where it went. Everything was above board on this. What we have is a strong misinterpretation and an outright washing of religion from all vestiges of government.
Right.
That is not what that amendment intended. Well, number one, guys, I mean, come on, the Bible was used as a textbook in the 1850s in public schools when the Blaine Amendment was started. And the 1913 case that they quote to prove it's not Blaine Amendment was an Oklahoma case that okayed the use of, among other things, that okayed the use of a Bible as a textbook in the public schools in the state of Oklahoma. There was nothing about that that was intended to wash all vestiges of religion from government. But ladies and gentlemen, that's what's happening. And we're rewriting history to do it.
Yes.
We're changing the way it was. So again, we are going to put to a vote of the people. That's my strong opinion. Vote of the people, repealing the Blaine Amendment, and adding in the Establishment Clause language from the United States Constitution, which doesn't currently exist in the Oklahoma Constitution. And I think we're going to get that done. And I'm going to answer a lot of questions on that in a minute. I also want to go very quickly to what we're doing on the pro-life issue. And going into another state law function, let's talk about the marriage decision. Yeah, turn back on. I teach family law at the Oklahoma City University Law School. I know a little bit about jurisprudence when it relates to family law. Throughout the history of this nation, marriage has been a strictly state issue. Throughout the history of this nation, what we've done with the definition of marriage has been a state-by-state basis. Now here's where I'm going to say something very controversial. I think it should continue to be. Meaning, if we have a different view than another state is, we should get to have it. That's the beauty of the state system. Every country in the history of the world, here's what they all have in common. It's weird. Do you know every civilization in the history of the world has one thing in common? They've all eventually failed. Every one of them. And there are superpowers that have failed that were much more powerful than the United States was, even in its heyday, on a worldwide basis. So why are we different? If we are different, why are we different? Our state system is what makes us different. That is our only chance. That we have the ability to let ideas rise and fall on merit. It's what frustrates me when I hear people about wanting to bail out California for their own stupidity. Ladies and gentlemen, look at your history. Nobody bailed out Oklahoma from the Dust Bowl.
That's right.
And we're stronger because of it. Sometimes you have some failed policies like we did. Then you have some bad economic climates, and we had to come out of it. That's why that issue is so important on the state level, and you will see massive pushback. You have Representative David Brumbaugh, who will be leading the effort on that charge, and you will see massive pushback on what we're doing for that issue. And the point is going to be made that it is a state issue. It has always been a state issue. It should remain a state issue. And the individual state should be able to do it. And guys, that means, though, as principled conservatives, there will be some states that will do some things that I wish they wouldn't do. And I hope their conservative members move to Oklahoma and they keep their liberal members. So, and that's why we have to stand up firm for the state system. I loved hearing what you said. So those are the big three issues that I see us attacking next year. I think I'm a little early on questions, but they're a lot more fun than hearing me talk on and on. I'm not recognizing JP or Randy Ross.
All right, so I'll moderate as best I can. There's a couple of questions I want you to answer. First, you've been talking about the solution, right? The solution is repeal the Blaine Amendment. But that is really just dressing the wound. The other question that has to be addressed is how do you put the court back in check and back in its place in subservience to the elected spokesman of the people? How do you get them back to just settling matters of dispute at law instead of telling us what the law is? Let me just give you one question at a time.
Okay. That's a great question, and if I had the answer for it right away, I would tell you, but I don't. I'd love for ideas. One idea I've had, we've talked a lot about the judicial nominating process. I've had an idea to give the governor unlimited vetoes on that, so she can, she or he, whoever the governor is, so you add more checks and balances when they originally appointed, which is one of them. Now, the next issue is tricky, and I'm going to be blunt on it. You've got to find a way to do it in a manner where the legislature, I have a role under Article 2. And by me, I mean the body as a whole. And ironically, of all of the articles, I've got the smallest role because there's just more of us under Article 2, or I'm sorry, under Article 1 of the Constitution. Now, the legislature was always intended to be the most powerful branch. And I know that's unpopular to say that way, but I guess it's my Christian heritage training that comes in. But that was the intent. If there's the reason it's the longest of the federal Constitution, there's the reason it's the one that has the most powers. But it's not supposed to be all powerful. I mean, we are supposed to have a check from the judiciary. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to do on the current court right now and be open for suggestions. But what I want to do is elect better judges from the beginning.
So just a quick brainstorm. If you've got a sticky note and you're making bullets, some things we can do. Impeachment is one of them. You can impeach him for bad behavior. Bad behavior is not defined. I think misinterpreting the law is bad behavior. Another thing you can do is you can just defy the court. Why not just pass a resolution and say, we hereby all agree that you guys blew it, and so the monument stays. If you want it moved, let's see you try it by yourself.
Well, here's
something like that.
That's very good.
Anybody else have another idea?
Yeah.
Randy's got an idea. I'm just going to make the rounds, and then you can comment on these ideas.
I've got a suggestion for Representative Echols.
Yeah.
As far as the court goes, I would suggest adopting a system similar to the one in Virginia, where the legislature appoints the judiciary with approval of the governor, and they have a 12-year term limit.
So changing how they get there is another big thing.
I think the important thing, the 7-2 vote, the 7 that were against the 10 Commandments, where did they get these judges from? And I talked to Todd Lamb and Mary Fallon, and they get them from folks like the corrupt Oklahoma Bar Association. Says, here's some to select from. And from those, that's where we got those bad judges. So how about getting another group to pick those judges for them to select from?
So again, changing how they get there in the first place. My turn.
Real quick, a couple of things to look at, because when we're just looking about rotating people in and out, you still have the same problem if you don't fix the structure.
Yeah.
And right now what you have is a structural problem that has made that imbalance where the judges and the justice and the judicial department has too much power, more power than they should under our system. Here's a proposal that I introduced just a couple of years ago, didn't make it too far because of the Senate. But that is when we're talking about at a district court level, before anything ever goes up to the appellate court or to the Supreme Court, that you have to have at least a 3-judge panel that's going to review any constitutionality of an act of the legislature. Because right now, it is one judge in any county in the state of Oklahoma that can say, absolutely, that's unconstitutional, and you're already behind the 8 ball when you have that decision before it goes up. Again, we need to resurrect that. I got it through the House, but of course it died over in the Senate. Number 2, here's another thing we need to look at. Yeah, we can toss people in and out. We can have them there for 8 years, 12 years, 20 years. But the thing is, what we need to address, and I think we do need term limits, but what we need to address is this 7-2 vote. I think that if we, as the legislature says, to overturn any act of the legislature on constitutionality, 8-1 vote. It has to be more than that. So if one justice, because we're talking about the smartest attorneys in the state, right? The most experienced attorneys in the state, allegedly, right? If it is clearly an unconstitutional act, then they should be able to agree 9-0. And let me address this real quick. People say, oh, 7-2, that's a landslide. There are only 2 justices, 2 of the most liberal justices, by the way, that actually voted against this. The thing is, our Supreme Court does not do 5-4 decisions very often. The Oklahoma Supreme Court most often is a 9-0 decision. So again, if 7-2 is actually a landslide the other way. So let's say, hey, it has to be at least 8-1, more than 8-1.
And can the legislature do that? Would that take a vote of the people? Is that something the legislature can just change straight up in the rules? Do you want to comment on any of these before I hit you with the next question?
Yeah, a couple of them. Yeah, I think the legislature could do that. That's a brilliant idea. We haven't talked about it, but I love that idea. I think the legislature could do it. We could limit the number of justices by statute if we wanted to. We could make a court of 20 or a court of 2. So I think they would have the ability to do that. It would end up being challenged. I like the idea of some type of a term limit too. And I don't know much about the Virginia model, but I'd love to look at it. So that's kind of it.
All right, I'll ask one more and then I'll make the rounds. And then you mentioned...
Don't ever when you recognize somebody, don't ever give the mic to him.
Did you recognize somebody else?
I thought you were handing it to Charlie.
That's what I thought. Go ahead.
That's what I thought was happening.
One other option that hasn't been discussed here, and that's to go back to electing judges. And we learned that very recently with Judge Roy Moore in Alabama. And he had been elected to the Chief Justice, ran for governor, was off the court, and then ran again and was put back on as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The thing about elections, and it won't always solve your problems, but the retention ballot now, if there's never a motive for some group to come up and challenge a judge that's on a retention ballot, then nobody ever knows anything about them. But in elections, when an attorney or somebody feels a judge is bad, that person will go out like district judges do. They'll go out and they'll raise money and they'll raise the issue and they'll point out how bad they are. Again, it won't solve every problem, but it's better than this worthless retention ballot system that we have right now.
No judge has ever been unretained, and almost always the votes are...
Well, dynamically, it's the difference between running against nobody and running against somebody. You can always win against nobody, but you might not win against somebody else. Okay.
We also elect the Chief Justice and then have the Associate Justice.
Right. All kinds of great ideas here. So let's move on a little bit because there's a lot more to talk about. Now, you mentioned Broombaugh is going to spearhead the charge to defend marriage in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
My question is, what's happening right now? Are there gay marriages being endorsed by the state right now against our Constitution?
Sure there are.
Why can't we do something now? To me, this rises to the level of special session. We should have done this 40 years ago when we started killing babies. This is another opportunity to stand up and say, hello, we're violating the laws of nature and nature's God and the Almighty God who allowed us to create this Constitution. Why aren't we fixing it right now? So what's the status? What's happening right now?
Well, I don't know of any call. The chairman called for a special session on the abortion issue. I think in order to have a special session, you get it one of two ways. The governor calls it, or 3/4. Now, it's either 2/3 or 3/4. I have to look at the rules. The legislature, both Senate and House, can call it for a specific purpose. The reality on a special session, and why, if it was called, I would support it, but the reason I don't think it's a good strategic decision is we have the state, we have the people on both of those issues. We have them. When we run a special session, I think we've got a strong chance of losing them. Maybe not losing all of them, but losing the plus 50% that we need to keep the types of reforms we're talking about. These are not small things.
Because
These
it's expense.
Yes, and
They want them to make the expense.
and they'll beat us up over the expense. You know, the expense.
How much is a life worth?
The expense. Now listen, I told you I'd vote for it, but I will tell you this. What I'm arguing to the expenses issue is a total red herring. We don't spend new money, by the way. Did you guys know that? The House and the Senate have a budget. When we had a special session a few years ago, the cost to taxpayers was nothing because it came out of the House and the Senate budget. And we had to move our money around like everybody else. It is a total red herring argument that nobody cares about hearing. It's like when I want to drone on and on about off-the-top spending. And just so you know, I've got to say it while I'm on. If you don't fix off-the-top spending, we will never fix our budget. But nobody wants to talk about it because it's crazy boring. That's the problem we have. Frankly, I'm afraid we lose the people.
I want to tell you a story.
How long is this story? Does it end with a question? Okay.
The guy that wrote our Constitution, Alfalfa Bill Murray, down in Johnson County, was my daddy's lawyer in later years. So my daddy took me with me. And I was 9 years old. I just got saved in a Baptist church. So I asked Coupler Bill, is what we call him, what do you think of God? And he said, young man, it's not what we think of God, it's what he thinks of us.
Alfalfa Bill Murray was also the first Speaker of the House.
Bill Murray wrote our Constitution. No wonder it's so funny.
I presume it'll take a joint resolution to get rid of the Blair Amendment.
Yes, sir.
And another one to put in the First Amendment verbiage.
I think they can do it the same one. I think it doesn't violate single subject.
You won't be log rolling. Don't do a log roll.
I agree.
Okay. How about having?
We'll handcuff the pen.
How about finding somebody with some cojones and reintroduce that Second Amendment bill that those bottom feeder slime ball Republicans shot down in the second committee that voted for it in the first committee. Let's get it through, we'll find those guys, we'll tar and feather them, they'll be in the hospital, then when it comes back, it'll go through. Okay?
I agree with you. For 3 years, it's an OK 2A change to it's the Oklahoma Third Amendment, but it's the Second Amendment of the federal Constitution. It's Dan Fisher's bill. I've been a co-author on it for 3 years. We got it out of the House my very first year, and they killed it in the Senate. Last year, we didn't even get it out of the House.
That's right, Republicans.
Yeah.
As long as we're putting stuff on the ballot this year.
Education law.
2016, it's a huge election year. Let's put a whole bunch of good stuff on the ballot. People would just go in and vote yes on everything like they always do. Let's fix all this crud.
The vote's going to be driven out.
Representative Bands, I asked Representative Bands, and I know you guys won't talk about him, but I will, if he would support any type of a nullification bill. And the licensure bill that we're looking at on the life issue is a form of nullification, is what it is. His answer was he would not support any kind of nullification bill at all. The reality of it is, if you will go home, John, and read about the sons of Issachar, you will find that the sons of Issachar had discernment, and they could discern the times that we're in. The Article 5, as put in the Constitution, was intended for the people of that time. If you're a son of Issachar today, you know that the people of America today, outside of Oklahoma and a few other states like it, are very, very different than the people of the time of our Constitution. I asked Rob Stanridge, Senator Stanridge, who is the key pusher for Article 5 in the Senate. I asked him, I said, if you convene an Article 5 convention, do you think we can get established in the Constitution, do you think we can establish marriage as between one man and one woman and ever get that ratified? And he said, absolutely not. I asked him if we could outlaw abortion and get that ratified. He said, absolutely not. I then asked him, could we possibly get a balanced budget amendment through that would be effective with probably 45 of the state's individual state economies dependent upon deficit spending? Could we ever get anything like that ratified? And I really didn't get an answer from him. If you're a son of Issachar, you're going to understand that the Article 5, while well-intentioned, won't work today. And what it is, John, is a diversion that's stealing energy and attention away from the educating that we need to be doing to the citizens of the state of Oklahoma to move on nullification and interposition, which will work and is the best way to reestablish the proper relationship between the states and the central government. I want to urge you, please, reconsider your strong support. I have a great deal of respect for you. You're a brilliant mind. But brother, you are killing your effort by supporting that, in my opinion.
The doctrine of interposition is a Christian one. Have you read this book yet? The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate? I will give this to you if you promise to read it. You can read it in 4 hours one evening. Okay, I'll make the same deal with JP, with Randy. Do you guys promise you'll read this book? It is yours.
But I don't support Article 5.
That's not about that. We just want you to read this book. This is our gift to you.
Quick question for Representative Echols. You did a great job addressing the myth that is, well, if the Ten Commandments monument stays, then everything comes in, the Satanic monument, everything else. And so you did a great job of arming this group with information. Here's the other main argument that I hear, and I'm sure you hear it address this. Why are we wasting taxpayer resources? Not another taxpayer dollar should be spent on this. Why is the legislature wasting their time on this issue when they should be focusing on prisons and education and roads? Address that argument.
Yeah, and you guys have heard that argument too. I understand the difference between, I cast 3,000 votes last year. You guys did too. Believe me, we have plenty of time. I can't stress that enough. So the problem is not that we don't have enough time, the problem is what we're doing with it. So the idea that we're quote-unquote wasting taxpayer dollars is absurd. Number one, if you believe religion should be washed from all vestiges of government, which is what the decision says, then that's the argument you make, but it's a total and complete red herring. I know you, Randy, have worked on, how many bills did you have signed into law last year? I thought there was several. Yeah, several. And then on top of that, working on this. I'm the same way. I mean, I've had no problem getting done. To be honest, guys, I work really, really hard in the private sector. Like, really hard. We got plenty of time to do what we do at the state capitol. So don't buy into this, we're wasting effort, and I even saw somebody say we only do one thing at a time. I wish that were true. We have days where we vote on 130 bills. Slowing down is what we need to do, not speeding up. So that's not the answer.
I'll just point out that it's a part-time legislature.
That's right.
And another problem. What if John is my rep and I've got serious problems with tyranny in my district and I need him to address it, and so he writes a bill that would fix the problem, and then the chairman of the House or the committee or whatever, they just shut his bill down. They won't even hear it, or they won't let him file it, or they say, well, you're only allowed to care about 8 things. Only 8. And there's no guarantees. They got time. They need to start hearing all the bills.
Other states do it, by the way.
Yeah, and this was just on point, but the response to the question of wasting money or time or whatnot, Echols has seen this. One of the best comments I've heard on this is, you know what, if you don't believe that the legislature has time to deal with something such as religious liberty, then I'm guessing that you're for privatization of just about every governmental function.
Should be great.
Yeah, which I'm all for. Hey, let's get it out. All sorts of.
Because what is the motivation for feeding people and clothing people and helping people? Who's got another question?
Right.
We're rocking and rolling.
That's a good one. It's been great.
Ooh, John, we might get to just do this the rest of ourselves.
I like hard ones. That's correct.
David Martin talked about how physically the Supreme Court was under the legislature in our U.S. Capitol, and how they were supposed to be spiritually under it, because this was a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But remember also, the caveat with that the Judeo-Christian ethics of the 10 Commandments was what contained them, and we must have a moral people for this government, otherwise it won't succeed. So our children need to be given some training.
Our governing systems, all of them, from bottom up to top down, were created by Christians on biblical principles and intended for Christians to administer. If Christians are not involved, then evil takes over and we allowed it on our watch. We have a duty to be involved. And if you don't protect innocent life and blood and property when you have the ability to, the guilt is on your head. And this nation is filled with pastors and pulpits who preach pacifism and pietism, and your religion is between you and your God, and you really shouldn't do anything to protect your innocent fellow man. Just sit in church and pray. Hogwash. Amen. Get out and protect innocent people. Amen. When the government conforms to your conscience, then it helps people realize that their conscience is right. We don't need government to assuage guilt. If you think someone might feel a twinge of guilt for killing an innocent child, we want to reinforce that through the government, because that leads possibly to repentance and salvation. The government can actually help to propagate the gospel, but it doesn't help at all if we say, oh no, they're there, it's okay, it's your civil right. You just go ahead and kill those babies, whatever, and tell them it's okay. So you've got 2 things at work in civil government that are very helpful. One is confirming God's conscience in every human being that can lead to repentance. And 2, it protects innocent people and property. There's no reason not to go this secular humanist route of, oh, whatever we all think, that's what we should do. The greatest outcome for the greatest number of people, the most happiness, whatever we vote is the most happy, that's what we should do. Well, who decides then what the standard is? Baloney. God is our standard.
Talking about symbols and signs, I was told quite some time ago that the German soldiers that were captured, that they built the Capitol. Now, if you go into the Capitol, I was told by somebody who I have a lot of respect for that said that that symbol going around the top perimeter in the Capitol building is a continuous swastika. So if you look at the thing, and if you truncate it, it is a perfect swastika, but it's perpetuated all the way around the Capitol building. And I was told that they said, we will not build it unless we can put this innuendo into our symbol of the swastika. And you're talking about fascism and all that type of stuff. So if anybody ever screams, yells, and cries about the Christian deal that Representative Fritz, my friend, put up there, say, how about the swastika up here, team, that was put up by the Nazis October?
Hidden symbols, always fun. John is still standing up here. Does anybody want him to talk about anything, or do you want to sit down and just let us go after?
I believe that you're a conservative, but I was just curious, is funding the museum a conservative thing to do? Did you not vote for that?
I voted for the cultural center. I didn't vote for the center. Yeah, and I'll answer the cultural center.
Okay, about 2 weeks ago, we had a session here where everyone who took the microphone had to confess a sin. That meeting, so if you want to just confess right now, go ahead.
I'll tell you why. We joke all the time too about the 90. Every year it seems like there's one that I miss, and that was one that I did. I'll tell you why. I'm right, wrong, or different. I'll tell you why I voted for the cultural center. Because I didn't see another good option. I voted against it the first time it came up my first year. We've got it sitting there. I didn't see a better way to deal with it. So we had to do something. I understand the position, I really do, and that's why I voted no on Pops, because there's a big difference between having a gun to my head and saying this was started 40 years ago, well, 25 years ago, do something about it, and this brand new boondoggle we're going to start. That's the same reason I questioned and debated against Pops. And I will tell you, I struggled on that vote. I struggled on that vote a lot, but that's why I voted for it. But it's a fair. I'm glad you asked it. I'd rather you ask it than think it, because that's a fair question. So,
Hey, John, call me next time. I'll show you the better way.
Let's take the last 4 minutes and do a quick training and refresher for all of us. The Oklahoma Constitution says no debt, period. No debt without a vote of the people. It says we'll have a balanced budget. Okay, what does balance mean? Here's how much money came in. That's how much you can spend. That's balanced. But instead what they do is they say we want to spend this much, only this much came in, we'll borrow the difference. There, see, it's balanced. But the Constitution says you can't borrow the money, not without a vote of the people. So again, the Oklahoma Supreme Court redefined what debt is so that they could borrow anyway in violation of the plain black and white language on the Constitution. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I don't have my slide and everything in my pocket Oklahoma Constitution, but it's right there. No debt without a vote of the people. No, that's not the Oklahoma one. The one by Bill Murray, the really funny one, that says no debt, and we go, no debt, no big deal. We'll just do it anyway. Okay, so we got 3 legislators in here. You can comment on that, talk about how to correct it, confess if you didn't know that was in the Constitution.
how come nobody wants to ask me why I debated against the seatbelt bill that was on the conservative index? Or how I authored the EPA bill that was on the, I'm just teasing you guys.
Do you guys want to comment on the budget and how we pass these? Are you in agreement? You want to go on record that we never should have voted for that stuff?
I've all day long on the budget, but I've talked about that with this group before.
Okay.
We got to change the budgeting process.
Let's call it a day. You guys can talk with them privately. Look, next week we're going to kind of continue in the same theme. Kevin Calvey's going to be here, and we're specifically going to be talking about how to hold justices, Supreme Court of Justices, accountable. How they get on there in the first place. How do you become an Oklahoma Supreme Court justice? He wants to reform and change that. He'll talk about that and probably some of these other issues. We'll continue this discussion. If you guys already know what he's going to say and disagree with him, come back, because that'll make it a lot more fun.
The last time Kevin Kelley came and spoke to us earlier this year about his ideas on pulling the ability of the Oklahoma Bar Association from being a part of the nominating committee for justices. In the audience that day was an attorney by the name of Christensen. She is the former wife of Wade Christensen, who is the governor's current husband right now. And she was absolutely going berserk as Kevin was making that, presentation. She came up to me and challenged me, says, if you really are fair-minded about this, you need to hear the other side of the story. And then she joined OCPAC as a voting member. I don't think she's been back a time, but I'll take the dues anyway at the time. And she said, oh, by the way, I'll bring Supreme Court Justice Norma Gurek with me to speak on this. And I said, that's fine, and we actually had a date set up. But when Kevin's bill didn't make it, all of a sudden they weren't interested in coming. Norma Gurek, I believe, is the one that expressed her extreme disapproval of the Ten Commandments monument because she disagreed with one of the commandments. So I kind of hope they do come, because it ought to be a really fun day when they do.
This has been a great meeting. Hey, let's call it a day and meet back here next week for church again. OCPAC Church right here next week. Bye.